Hi everyone, it's Rehman here, the Member of Parliament for Gillingham and Rainham. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Sam Brownback for another episode of my In Conversation With series, where we'll be discussing the important topic of freedom of religion or belief around the world and what more can be done to champion this fundamental, basic human right. Sam served as the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom from 2018 to January 2021, a position which leads on advancing freedom of religion or belief around the world for the United States government. And prior to becoming Ambassador at Large, Sam served as the Governor of Kansas from 2011 to 2018. And he also served as a US Senator for Kansas from 1996 to 2011. And prior to that, he served his country and his district, Kansas 2, in Congress from 1995 to 1996. And I had a real pleasure of working with Sam when I served as the United Kingdom Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief from September 2019 to September 2020. So it's absolutely fantastic that Sam can join us today. Sam, great to have you with us today.
Hey, Raymond, it's just great to join you. It's good to see you, even if it's virtually, and look forward to the conversation. It was wonderful working with you in that position. I wish you were still in it, although Fiona Bruce is great, but you were just, it was wonderful working with you, and I really enjoyed the time, and I thought we got a lot done.
And you know what, Sam, I wish you were still doing that role for the United States, because you did a fantastic job. A lot of that we're going to cover now, but for me, when you were leading the Alliance, the International Religious Freedom Alliance, you know, from the vision to the idea to getting international partners coming on board and to tangible results, you did a fantastic job. And that's some of the work that we're going to cover in the conversation. So can I just kickstart the conversation with my first point, a question to you. Having served as the US Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom from 2018 to 2021, can you just give us an overview of your work so that everyone can understand the importance of the role as the Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom for the United States? And with that, what would you say were the key achievements that you and the administration in the United States delivered at the time in promoting freedom of religion or belief around the world?
No, thanks. You know, I truly believe that if we're going to see peace be able to spread around the world, at the heart of that is going to have to be this recognition of religious freedom. That is, that people can practice their faith peacefully, and they're entitled to, and the government will guarantee that right. And if we don't do that, and we're seeing that in a number of countries around the world today, and particularly in Asia and Africa, you see conflict. You see a lot of people getting killed. You see persecution. You see people put unjustly in jail. So to me, this is just one of those basic building blocks that if you don't get it right, you're going to have more conflict, and you're going to have less growth and less freedom for the people. And if you do get it right, you're going to be able to build stronger and bigger as a society. And going forward with the integration of the world community and how much people travel and interact and exchange, you're either setting up for this clash of civilizations built on religion, or you're setting up for a strong world of human rights of the individual based on freedom of religion. And to me, that's the real grasp of all of it.
And totally linked to that, Sam. So you would then say that freedom of religion or belief is not just simply a basic fundamental right. It is a national security imperative, and it leads to virtuous, prosperous, secure countries around the world.
Yes, or it leads to conflict in nations around the world if you don't have it. I believe it is. You know, we have a different definition of football. We've got our oblong football, and you have what the world recognizes as football, or we call soccer. But Vince Lombardi was one of the great coaches in U.S. history of our American football. And he used to start every season with holding up a football and saying, "This, men, is a football." You know, and one of his all-pro players one time said, "Coach, will you slow down? You're going a little fast for me." But the point of it was, he was saying, you've got to get the fundamentals right to be able to actually move forward. And that's, I believe, the same with societies. And I think that's what's so imperative about this particular right.
Yeah, and Sam, I hope you having touched football or soccer, that you're wearing your Gillingham jersey, which we exchanged in our visit to the Holy See back in October last year. But you're always welcome to a Gills game when you visit England next time.
That's right. I need to bring you a Kansas City Chiefs jersey, so you can, we can exchange fairly here.
I'm looking forward to it. So the other point I wanted to ask is, with the role that you carried out, with the vigor, the leadership, you had comments recently by Susan Crabtree, a journalist for Real Clear Politics, say, with the help of the Pompeo and Sam Brownback, Trump's ambassador at large for religious freedom, the administration also elevated the issue of religious freedom by hosting annual international summits highlighting the plight of persecuted religious minorities around the world. The summits held in 2018 and 2019 led to greater coverage and awareness about numerous abuses worldwide. You did that with strong leadership from the front and the support of your administration. Do we know how soon the new ambassador at large will be appointed by the United States?
We don't, but I do have friends that are being interviewed for that job.
Right.
So, I'm taking that as a positive sign that they're going to put somebody forward soon in that role. And there, U.S. domestic politics gets involved in this and a great deal. But there is bipartisan support for international religious freedom in the United States. We had Speaker Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi was one of our keynote speakers at the summit we did on international religious freedom. And she's great on pushing back against China and the persecution, particularly for the Tibetans and the Uyghurs that take place, and the Catholic community that gets persecuted in China. So I think this administration is going to be good on the topic. But I think they've got to work their own system, and they want to say, look, all human rights are equal human rights. They don't like this elevation of one over the other. And you can call it what you want to, but I would hope they would look at this one as just one of those fundamental building blocks. It's in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It's in the US Constitution. It's in most Western constitutions. It's protected in law and practice. And I hope they'll also start to see that this is one of the keys to peace. We got the Abrahamic Accords that came through in the Middle East between Israel and UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, built on this understanding of each other's faith. I mean, that's fantastic. And I hope they will look at those things, plus just how terrible China and the Communist Party there has been on persecuting people of faith. And then they want to enable more of that around the world. This is really a clash of systems, of government systems, of the authoritarian model that the Chinese put forward and the democratic model that we put forward in the West.
And I'm going to just come to that very shortly, but can I just ask a clarification on something linked to the role of the ambassador at large for religious freedom? The United Kingdom appointed its first special envoy in 2018, and in 2019, as part of the Truro review into persecution of Christians and for all around the world, the United Kingdom appointed a special envoy dedicated specifically to the role which I took on in 2019. What would you say to countries around the world who don't have a special envoy with regards to appointing a special envoy, and linked to those countries that have? What kind of structures would you say they need to have linked to the role that you had, where you were exceptionally effective at getting things done?
Yeah, I would say that they're missing one of the basic pieces of society. Now, while in the West, there's been a lot of decline of religious affiliation, most of the world moves daily by their faith, by what they believe. 80% of the world moves by their faith. And yet a large percent of that world isn't free to practice their faith. What I would say to Western governments is we all are very focused on separation of church and state, synagogue, mosque and state. We want these to be separate entities, and they must be, I think, to operate effectively. Yeah. But I think they're missing the boat on a diplomatic and a security issue if they downgrade freedom of religion because of this focus on separation of of the faith community and the government. It is an essential part of human society in most places around the world. And I would hope they would figure a way to be able to address the issue of freedom of religion or belief and still maintain this separation that's so key and keen in Western societies.
Got it. And Sam, can I just move you on to the next point? And that is linked to COVID-19 and the impact on religious minorities around the world. When you were the chair of the International Religious Freedom Alliance, or Belief, they issued a statement, which the United Kingdom was part of last August, signed by 19 countries with regards to the impact of COVID-19 on religious minorities around the world. A year on nearly from that, what would you say has been the key impact or the growing impact of COVID-19 and religious minorities around the world?
The positive piece of it is we got a lot of people out of jail. There are literally thousands of people in jail around the world for simply peacefully practicing their faith. And we got over 2,000 of them out, with the countries joining together and pushing, saying, don't keep these peaceful religious prisoners in jail, subjecting them to COVID. Maybe a number of them die in that situation. And we saw a number of countries, Eritrea, Uzbekistan, amongst them, even Iran, release a number of religious prisoners. And that was the good part. The bad, and also I think a good part was we raised awareness in these countries where aid programs would target religious majorities, but would exclude religious minorities, or use their aid to say, if you will convert, then we will give you the COVID assistance. And we're saying all religious faiths need to be treated as equal citizens and access to these rights. So I think one of the things that was exposed was this inequality of citizenship in a number of countries, where the religious majority gets the aid programs and the religious minority does not.
Yeah, and then the other country that where real progress was made in getting prisoners of conscience or religious prisoners released was in Yemen with the Baha'is. I know the work that you did with our good friend Ambassador Josh Schumer from the Netherlands. Real progress was being able to make that. But I think the work that you did in Uzbekistan, over 1,200 prisoners, religious prisoners,
1,400, 1,400 released. And people able to freely practice their faith, as Uzbekistan really moves from this old Soviet model really into a more open democratic model where they guarantee religious freedom. They've been doing a fabulous job, as has Sudan, a country that for years was a terrible persecutor of people if you weren't in the majority faith. They have flipped. They've even repealed their apostasy law, one of the first in the world to do that. They've been amazing, Sudan.
And your leadership on that, in getting those individuals released, whether it's Uzbekistan, whether it's the Baha'is in Yemen or Iran, or Eritrea, I think across the board, looking at that last year, real tangible results were achieved by the Alliance and what you were doing as leading the Alliance on that. So a big thank you to you and the work that your team did on that. Can I just touch on one other thing with regards to the impact of COVID-19 and on religious minorities? I'm looking at the statement that you gave on the 14th of May, 2021, where you were speaking at the US Embassy in Georgia, and you said the problem tends to fall into 5 categories: straight government repression, discrimination in the health sector, kind of hoaxes and scapegoating category, online inflammatory speech, and misuse of technology. Those were the 5 key features which you highlighted as being used to target religious minorities around the world. Would you say that's still the case with those 5 different categories?
I think so, although, anymore, Raymond, with the speed with which technology is integrating into culture and society, I would probably put that at the top of the list. You're just seeing, again, and I hate to double back to them, but it's just so true. China has really perfected these systems of putting in cameras, facial recognition systems. They put them up. If you go to a mosque in Xinjiang, you're likely headed to these detention facilities, these concentration type camps that they have. And then they're sending these systems out to other countries. They're not expensive systems once you get the data loaded in them, and the ability to track cell phones and who is contacting you on your cell phone. That's, to me, the big concern now is the misuse of technology to oppress religious. So you won't end up in jail as often, but you'll get excluded from the society. And if they move towards an all digital currency, to where there's no physical currency, it's all on your phone, you've got a government that can track every transaction and exclude you if they decide they don't like your practice of faith.
And that was one area, the misuse of technology to target religious minorities, which the US was leading on the alliance. Would I be right on that? That was the area which
that is, and is still the case. You really see a lot of people here pretty amped up about this misuse of technology. Is a wonderful thing. It allows you and I to do this and to be able to exchange these views and stay connected. But it can also be misused to track you or me, or exclude us from the society. And that's where you're seeing a lot more people saying, we've got to really have a discussion and parameters around the misuse of technology. And I'm saying particularly in this area of protection of religious minorities.
And we're going to come on to that when we cover the China specifically a bit later down the line. Can I just ask you specifically with regards to some countries and the COVID-19 and impact on religious minorities? I'm just looking at a note here. Freedom House, a US-based NGO, has reported that members of the Indian government have demonized the country's Muslim community. And it's further reported with India by the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group, and also the same is covered by Professor Maurice Tedros from Coalition for Religious Equality and Inclusive Development with regards to the disinformation and the targeting of Muslims in India. So you visited India previously. What can be done to address the challenge by religious minorities in India?
This is a huge problem and growing. And my hope is really that the global community, and particularly the global democracy community, would push back against this targeting of a religious minority in another democracy, the largest democracy in the world. And I hope really we can do this in conversations. I hope we can do this in pressing on them and showcasing this. And if need be, then saying, okay, we're going to push in more tangible ways if the Indian government doesn't start stepping up and addressing these issues. It's been trending bad and getting worse in India. And some of these Muslim communities around the world, I think, are the most persecuted anywhere. The Rohingya out of Myanmar. This is one of the worst situations for a religious minority in the world, a specific targeting over decades, and then resulting in this expulsion that many were killed during. My estimation is clearly a genocide that they've experienced.
And tell me, you visited, Bangladesh as one of your first visits as the ambassador at large, and you saw for yourself firsthand the impact of the persecution that the members of the Rohingya community were having.
I did. And I interviewed a number of children that were there, probably 10, 15 children. And all of them but one had seen a family member either killed or severely injured in the attacks. These children, these are under age 10. They're not lying or trying to beef up the story to sell somebody in the West on it. They don't know that. I just asked them what they had seen. It was horrific, but it doesn't stop there. And this is pretty typical too, Raymond. Okay, they're targeting the Rohingya that are mostly Muslim, but they also target the Christians, the Korean and the Kachin that are there, who are not in the majority faith. And this we see taking place in a lot of places around the world, which comes back to the essence of why you've got to protect religious freedom for your minorities that peacefully just want to practice their faith.
Good. And can I just ask specifically on Myanmar? There was greater emphasis and focus on the persecution of Rohingyas and over the years. But now recently, we've just had a military takeover in Myanmar. What now needs to be done to further focus on religious freedom? Because at the moment, the focus is on the removal of a democratic government. And now you've got a military government in place. But the refocus back on religious freedom and freedom across the board with a military government now in Myanmar, what do you think needs to be done to best address the issues of freedoms and freedom of religion or belief in that part of the world?
I think you just really need to call it what it is. I think the global community needs to step up and call it a genocide. I think they need to really sanction the government, and particularly the military generals that lead the government with these Magnitsky type of sanctions. I think would be an important and key thing to do. And I think it needs to be done globally. I really hope that much of the Western world will step up on this one. And people say, well, what about the real politics? It's going to throw them into the arms of the Chinese more. And that's already happened. And we previously, when the United States heavily sanctioned Myanmar under the Bush administration with the Jade Act, it helped force them towards some democratic openings that they have since walked away from. But these can be effective. And plus, we need to do it out of a moral outrage, if nothing else. Here's a people strictly that targeted, I mean, ethnicity, some people will say, but I believe it is really targeted on the faith issue. And we need to step up and stand up on this one.
Do you know what I think, Sam, on that? You're absolutely right. And with regards to, I think, July 2019, when I was in office as the Envoy, one of the first designations that we had on the Magnitsky style sanctions, there were Myanmar generals were covered in that. And I think it's then working with the US and other international partners, I think the EU, to make sure there is that international coordinated approach of sanctions and to bring into account those responsible for these horrific acts. But we're going to touch on that a bit later on sanctions with regards to, on the wider scale, what more can be done on addressing genocide and also accountability. Can I just ask you specifically, we also had in the UK all-party parliamentary group report, it covered Iraq and Christian communities, were the last to get necessary food and medical supplies during COVID-19. And now we've recently seen the Pope Francis's visit to Iraq. What hope can one draw from that recent visit by Pope Francis in promoting freedom of religion or belief in that part of the world?
If I could have done backflips, I would have done one. When he's meeting with Sistani, that's arguably the leading Shia cleric in the world. I just think this sends volumes of messages out to people in the world about the Abrahamic connection here. I mean, here are two people whose faith claims rootedness in the person of Abraham. And that we need to be using the working with religion as a tool of peace and to build understanding, not as a tool of division and to build war. And these two gentlemen were doing it. I was greatly encouraged. But Iraq also brings out to great relief a key point that you had worked on, that the Brits had led on, and that's the use of development aid. And I think the development aid needs to be really, one of the key focuses needs to be minority religious communities, to use that development aid tool to support those religious minority communities. Now, I know AID in the United States is backing away some on that. Apparently, they're keeping some of it as well. But my hope is that the Western world that uses development aid in a number of places will add as a special category. They have a number of categories now. They really try to help on the gender area. They try to help on people with disabilities. I hope they'll add to another category here, and that being the religious minority communities. I think it would be quite a good statement.
And I think we also previously saw the Wilton Park Conference on International Development Aid and supporting religious minorities in 2018. And I know on the work on the Alliance, there were a number of countries which were looking at working together on international development aid to support religious minorities around the world. And would you say this is something with the G7 and G20, coming out, it's something which can be looked at that level, coming together to help best address the supporting religious minorities around the world with the impact of COVID-19, as we are doing with regards to the vaccine rollout to the developing world? This could be something on developmental aid that can be looked at for religious minorities.
I believe absolutely. And I think it also can be one of the key distinctions between an authoritarian regime approach, like what China uses, and democracy approaches. Ours guarantees religious freedom. Theirs guarantees religious persecution. And we ought to show that in sharp relief around the world, saying if we're in a competition of systems now, and China is saying their system is better, this authoritarian, one key figure at top that rules and designates, we should showcase, okay, what's that look like in ordinary life? Okay, here's what it looks like to you if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist or Falun Gong practitioner. This is what it looks like. It looks like heavy persecution in those authoritarian regimes because they can't stand another allegiance outside of one just to the government as being the God in that country.
And so I'm just looking at on the wider field with regards to what the international community can do with regards to religious freedom and the impact of COVID-19, or just promoting freedom of religion or belief across the board all year round, every day. I saw the statement by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in May 2020, who warned that the pandemic continues to unleash a tsunami of hate and xenophobia, scapegoating and scaremongering around the world. With that being the case, what do you think the United Nations can do? I know with our time on the alliance, United Kingdom was, had drafted a UN Security Council resolution on protecting religious minorities in conflict zones. But what do you think the United Nations can do on promoting freedom of religion or belief around the world, and also focusing on COVID-19?
If they want to weaken the clash of civilizations around the world, this is a core thing they need to take up. And they need to take it up the way the alliance did, that we're guaranteeing religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time as a fundamental human right in the UN Charter. But I think, Raymond, they need to back it up now with passion and action. I mean, the UN bodies can get passionate on some things and have increasingly, whether it's environmental issues, that they really say, okay, we're going to grab this. Well, if they really want to pursue peace in the world, and to me, that's the ultimate objective of the UN, is to pursue peace in the world, you've got to address this topic, and you've got to do it with passion and commitment. And I think that's building in the UN systems, but I haven't seen a lot of it yet take action.
And can I just ask on that, and just on action-led approach? The Secretary General said this, in 2020, with COVID-19 has unleashed a tsunami of hate and xenophobia, scapegoating and scaremongering. If the Secretary General now wanted to go a step further, he could initiate an inquiry into the impact of COVID-19 on religious minorities around the world. So he can have a statement and then say, as a result of that, the Secretary General could now hold his own inquiry into the impact of COVID-19 on religious minorities. That's right, isn't it? He could if he wanted to.
He absolutely could, and I think it'd be very helpful, just as the Bishop of Turo's report that the UK did was extraordinarily helpful. It really was one of those kind of seminal moments when that came out, because, we do reports all the time. People do reports all the time, and some of them have impact and a lot of them sit on shelves. But that one identified, look, you've got a real problem. You've got Christians being thrown out of the Middle East, and they have been for decades. And we need to not be scared to talk about it. A lot of times in Western countries, we're scared of saying it's the Christians that are persecuted because of either some sort of colonial baggage that we think is there, or we need to say whoever it is that's being persecuted and wherever they're being persecuted. I love some of these recent studies coming out on the Falun Gong and the organ harvesting. A couple of them, one of them in Great Britain, that you had a high level group that examined this charge of organ harvesting of Falun Gong members, which they concluded is true and has been happening. That is important to stand up.
You're absolutely right. And the person who was leading on inquiry on that was Jeffrey Nice QC, who did a brilliant report, and who's also, like you, was sanctioned by the Chinese government for doing their job, for standing up for what they believe in. You got sanctioned, parliamentarians got sanctioned in the UK, in the US. Jeffrey Nice QC, as a lawyer, looking at the inquiry on the evidence base, got sanctioned for doing his job. This kind of behavior has got to be challenged at every level, because the Chinese have to understand that people have freedoms around the world. And as a result of that, they can speak on what they believe rather than being told what they can say, what they can do.
I completely agree. You know, one of the leaders of the Tibetan cause said on a discussion that we had as part of the alliance, he said, either the world will change China or China will change the world. We're probably in that stark of a situation today. And look at who they sanctioned. So they sanctioned the gentleman that does the inquiry on organ harvesting of religious minority. Now, organ harvesting is what we're talking about. This is the most graphic, gross thing you can probably think of since the Middle Ages. And they sanctioned him, and we sanctioned Chen Quanguo, the Communist Party chairman over Xinjiang, who previously was over Tibet and did the same thing there to brutalize the Tibetan Buddhists that he's done to the Muslim Uyghurs. I look at the comparison of who's being sanctioned here. This is wrong on China's part, and I hope the world really clamors against what they're doing.
And I think we're going to come back onto China, but you're absolutely right. And then also to sanction in the UK the Blackstone barristers' chambers for giving a legal opinion. Well, it's their job to give legal advice on the evidence before them. You know, that's what lawyers do. It was shocking and appalling what we saw with the sanctions they imposed on institutions in the UK, parliamentarians, and lawyers for, as you say, independently chairing an inquiry on what the situation was happening with the Falun Gong situation that we saw. The other one that I wanted to ask you, and also thank you for reminding me, with regards to the Bishop Truro's report and what the UN can learn from that, you know, big tribute to Bishop Philip for actually putting forward a report with tangible results, recommendations, 22, on how to improve freedom of religion or belief around the world. And I had a real privilege of taking forward many of those recommendations. I think it was 17 out of 22 at the end. And you and I worked together on that. So I think having a report with tangible results, like Bishop Truro did, I think is a good example of what the UN could do if it wanted to with an inquiry on freedom of religion or belief. Can I ask you a specific question? A country that has come up on the radar, I know Miles Windsor from RFI had written an article on the impact of COVID-19 and religious minorities in Christian community in Algeria. And he said the issue with, mosques were allowed to open early, but churches were not allowed to open. And what you had, an independent commission, which was looking at the opening of places of worship for minority communities, had not met for 15 years. So with regards to countries like Algeria, and there we're clearly, and I saw it during my time as the envoy for freedom of religion or belief in the UK, how do you address where is the leverage to bring about that real change in countries like Algeria?
Yeah, I think on a country like Algeria, one of the key things is to lift public light up on it. The Algerians don't like to be highlighted in public. Like, they like to do things in a way and just try to do it subtle and not anybody see it and then slip on through. I think Algeria is a key one that the rest of the world really needs to focus on and talk about and highlight when these situations take place. And if they do good things, highlight that as well. But that's one where I think there's been clearly a lack of focus on and needs to have a lot more light shined on it.